I want to see my fish.
They want to see your face. It's the last chapter. They gotta know your emotions.
It'd be sad.
Hello and welcome, or welcome back as the case may be. I'm Christine E. Schulze, aka the Elvish author, and it's time for another chapter reaction, where usually we would read from new books to help you and us discover new things to read. But if you're here, hopefully you know, and if you don't know, go back to the beginning of the playlist so that you're not totally spoiling this whole experience. But we are actually today at the end of reading my entire Legend of Zelda fanfic called Demon Queen. He's very upset for several reasons. Number one, because the book is almost over. Number two, because he's probably mad at me about how it's going to end. Because he already has his suspicions, and we'll talk about those after the reading of the book. But yeah, I mean, man, we may as well just jump right into it. But let's have a quick little recap of what happened last time. What happened last time in chapter 11?
Why am I always bad at this question?
Oh, well, I'm even trying to think. We were really tired last week, so I'm trying to actually refresh myself.
Great weekend.
But
so everything's coming to head. I know that.
Everything is coming to a head. So we know
Ganon was born.
Ganon was born via, that's right.
Deception.
Yes, via deception. So Kataki has talked about how she's barren. She can't have kids. So Komei, has this love for her sister. And so that was their first creation of Twin Rova, was them coming together to create this, woman called Amira. But really, that's obviously an ode to the fact that Twin Rova appears in Ocarina of Time. Mm-hmm. So they merged together so that Kataki could essentially borrow Komei's womb, and because she has that weird, funky acceleration spell anyway, sorry, is that funny? It's kind of funny.
The implications, it's whatever.
It's awkward. Anyway, because of her acceleration spell, Ganon was born very quickly, and so now we have Ganon born of Girahim and Kataki and Komei. I'm just gonna say it that way. And then we have, she's like a surrogate, basically, Anyway. And then
it's a weird way to go about it.
And then we have the other child, blonde-haired, blue eyes, that was born of Sakura and Girahim. And I do again want to point out about Girahim's always talking about Sakura having a very strong spirit, and that's all I really want to say about that. But also there was a conversation between Komei and Girahim where Komei was basically just like, you gotta get your girl the F out of here because Kataki means to do harm against Sakura and your son that you've had with her. So you guys gotta flee. So Girahim...
Before that conversation, Sakura and Girahim had a conversation about taking her to a safe area.
Yes, taking her to a safe area. And he actually just told her to flee to the woods where a tree spirit might take them in. So, this is... They can't see it from here.
I know, I was trying to...
Can't see it from here. I do have a painting of the Great Deku Tree that I made quite a while ago. That's what he's trying to look at. But anyway, we're just going to start into chapter 12. We're going to read chapter 12, which is the last chapter, as well as the epilogue, and that will complete the book. So you ready?
Mm-hmm.
All right, y'all, strap on your elf ears and get ready to listen to the finale
Your elf hearts
of Demon Queen. Chapter 12. Girahim slammed the approaching wave of undead and beasts with fire and shadow. Oh yeah, that's right. Kataki also gained control of his armies and is sending them all after him. I was like, I knew we were missing something. Some of the hordes fell at his feet, but the rest thundered past, pursuing his queen. His queen, Sakura. He could not leave her to this fate. She could not outrun them alone, no matter what ancient magic she possessed to aid her. He could contend with Kataki later. He must follow her, shield her from harm at least until she had breached the desert borders. From there, he could erect a barrier between the narrow cliffs that should hold off the armies for a while. He burst from the stable and shouted commands for his armies to stop, but they raged blindly on, a mad hunger illuminating eyes that glowed a fierce bright blue instead of their usual crimson. Kataki truly had bewitched them into becoming her puppets. Without a counter-curse, Girahim could not regain his army, nor could he stop it from overrunning Sakura. A massive wall of ice erupted from the ground, stretching high and thick in a matter of moments. Girahim raced down its length and prepared to leap over, but then it turned overhead and to the side. He leapt up again, but it turned again. He continued to race against the expanding ice, but it kept turning and growing, till at last he found himself encased in a massive cage of transparent ice, helpless to do anything but stare out at the legions rushing secure right on her heels. A proud laughter made Girahim wheel about. Kataki stood on the far side of the ice-encased arena. She danced toward him, ice rippling along her blue-tinted fingertips like tiny flames. "Let her go, Kataki," Girahim spat. He dug his fingers into the ice wall, sending wave after wave of flame through his body, but its thickness was impenetrable. Only the slightest sweat dripped where his fire touched. By the time he escaped, it would be too late. His singular chance was to stand and fight. In breaking Kataki, he might break this wall she had erected around them. "I will fight you," he said, drawing his hands away from the wall and turning to face her straight on, "and I will destroy you. You have this one last chance to spare your pathetic human life before I take it." Kataki laughed. "Do you really expect me to be frightened, when it is I who commands your armies and has you trapped as you now are? There is no hope left for you secure, I'm afraid. I have seen it. She will fall. Pity, isn't it? To fight for something we love so much, only to have it fall by the wayside, forgotten, unredeemable." She flew over till she hovered right over him. Staring him straight in the eye, her gaze devoid of anything but vengeance, she whispered, "She has been your weakness. You say you're incapable of love, but whatever you have grown to feel for her has been ruling you, and you have let it, and now it shall lead to your demise, and hers, and that stupid little brat of yours." I like that she said demise. Pun not intended. Maybe it was, who knows. With a roar, Girahim flung a wave of fiery darts at Kataki. She zipped back through the air, darting between them with perfect ease and cackling with glee. Girahim drew his sword and surged after her. She wielded her two curved blades, dancing and spinning. Tiny ice daggers flew from the blade's sharp curves, cutting into his skin with as great a wrath as any fire, but he pushed through, coming at her again and again. Their swords clashed, but no blows landed. Still, he fought on, hoping to distract her as he struggled to pry her mind open, to find the source of her spell and stop it. But the harder he fought to penetrate her mind, the higher and thicker a wall he seemed to slam up against. "Fool!" Kataki sneered. "You don't think my sister thought to teach me to guard against every aspect of your magic? I now know the way your magic works, perhaps better than you do yourself. Sword spirit!" Girahim staggered back mid-air and just managed to catch his footing and block another wave of icy shards. He threw up a temporary fire shield, turning the shards to steam the moment they hit. "How do you know what I am? And how dare you address me as such? I am more than a sword spirit. I am a lord of demons." "Call yourself what you will. You are a puppet, a slave to the master you would seek to usurp. You have no power of your own." "Sister!" Girahim glanced up as a brilliant orange-red blazed across the sky. A ring of fire melted part of the ceiling and Kome somersaulted inside, just before the ice reformed and snapped shut behind her. "Kataki, stop this madness!" Kome shouted, rushing up beside her, panic gripping her usually stalwart demeanor. "You may hate Secura and the demon, but what of the infant? You worked so hard to create a life. How now can you bear to destroy one just as innocent as your own? Call off the armies." "I created that life so it may rise and become king above all others. Girahim's offspring is not innocent. I will show you what the stars showed me, sister, and then you shall see." Sheer horror flooded Kome's face. "You did not really ask the stars. You did not sacrifice part of your soul." "Do not tell me what I have done or will do. Everyone supposes me to be weak, but I will do whatever I must to take what is mine, and not even you will stop that, sister. What now will you do? Will you stand with me or against me?" Kataki stretched out her hand toward Kome, then yanked it back. Kome flew through the air toward her sister as if controlled by invisible puppet strings. Holding her sister close to her, Kataki began muttering a spell. A wild grin masked her face as she chanted, her gaze alive with fury and glee. "Let go of me!" Kome gasped, struggling against her sister. She glowed bright red, and flames lit to her skin, but for once Kataki seemed unaffected. "You cannot complete this spell on your own. It is meant to be shared equally. You don't know what damage you might do. You can't perform it on your own." "Unless one of us is stronger," Kataki corrected. "And right now, I am stronger, sister. This demon isn't the only one I have been training how to fight against." Bright blue and red rays of light shot from Kataki's skin, making her glisten as though armored in rubies and sapphires. Kome emitted a cry of pain that made even Girahim shiver. The sisters were consumed by the light one moment, and the next the light faded to reveal a new yet familiar woman hovering before him. Myra, Girahim breathed. No, you will call us by our rightful name, the hybrid sorceress thundered. We are Twin Rova, the most powerful sorceress to ever tame this land, as even now we will tame you, demon. Twin Rova spun, shooting flame with one hand, ice with the other. Girahim dodged, dancing wildly across the arena. He stayed near the walls, hoping the fire would melt them, but as several blasts collided with the ice, they created little more than a steamy hiss before the ice solidified to its full strength once more. As Girahim continued his cat-and-mouse chase, he tried to focus his conscience beyond the wall. If he could reach out and find Sakura, maybe he could help her even from afar. He saw snatches here and there, her riding on the horse, clutching the babe close, the armies pursuing, but nothing solid enough for him to connect with her or grant her any kind of protection. A pillar of flame and ice surged toward him. Creating another makeshift fire shield, he sidestepped the pillar of ice and absorbed the fire. The ice followed him, but he danced around the arena, avoiding it while consuming the fire until his entire body burned with such vehemence he felt certain he would explode from the intensity. The impact of the fire soon brought him to his knees. Twin Rova laughed viciously. No doubt Kataki thrilled at the sight of seeing him kneel before her, and perhaps Kome did too. There was no way to tell if Kome maintained her own conscience, or was slave to Kataki's very thoughts trapped inside her joined body. Just when Girahim thought he would collapse entirely, the fire burst from his shield, slamming Twin Rova back against the far wall. Girahim leapt to his feet, panting hard, and flew at the stunned beast of a woman, sword lifted high. Twin Rova staggered to her feet and flew out of harm's way just in time, but a stench rose from her flesh, which was burned and blackened in patches along one half of her body. Kataki's half, he guessed. He remembered the first battle he had ever waged with the sisters. Perhaps that was still the key. Perhaps that was still their weakness, to play their own powers against them. Girahim extinguished his shield of fire, created one of shadow, and set to weaving between the tendrils of flame, absorbing the ice into his new shield. Fury lit Twin Rova's gaze as she caught on. She fought to knock him down with her fire and break his concentration, but he artfully dodged each time, all the while collecting the icy power till at last it burst at Twin Rova. The great sorceress fell again, only to rise more slowly, with fresh burns patching the other half of her body. As Twin Rova flung more fire and ice, Girahim raised both his fire and shadow shields, absorbing both attacks. Her magic grew more erratic as she stumbled about, making for many a narrow escape on Girahim's part. Still, the slowness of her movements made collecting the magic easier, till at last he sent a massive wave of both fire and ice at her. A vicious scream split the air, and the blinding light flooded the arena. When it faded, the sisters lay separated once more, trembling on the ground and gasping for breath. Girahim flung a wild look around the walls of ice, but they seemed strong as ever. "Traitor!" Kataki screeched, flinging a wild look at her sister. "You let him just rip us apart!" "Yes, I did." Kome stumbled to her feet and marched toward her sister, who still cowered on the ground, trying to rise but falling each time. "I saw my opportunity and seized it. You cannot control me like that, sister. We work as equals or not at all, and I do not support you in this. I cannot." Kataki stretched forth her hand, and tendrils of ice spun through the air, pinning Kome to the far wall. Just as she opened her lips to protest, one of the icy shards knocked her across the forehead, erasing the look of pleading from her face as her eyes closed and her head fell limp against her chest. Kataki flung a wave of ice at Girahim. He canceled the ice with a round of fiery darts, and their cat-and-mouse game continued. Demon and sorceress ricocheted off the ice walls, dueling with fire and ice. Suddenly, one of Kataki's icy blasts knocked against his sword, and absorbed inside his blade, just as it had with his shields. Girahim blocked another blow, only for the same thing to happen again. Blow after blow he blocked, till at last his sword quivered as though it might detonate from the pent-up power. And then, as he blocked another icy attack, it did. The ice burst from his sword like fireworks. Some of the shards pierced Kataki, who winced in pain before seeming to absorb the ice right back into her skin. Several shards pierced Girahim, but he fought through the pain, darting around and absorbing several of the icy bits back into his blade. Kataki flung another round at him, and he absorbed those too. When his sword weighed heavily once more, the ice magic exploded from the blade. Girahim swung the sword right at her, and the ice arched toward her like a volley of arrows. Kataki flung her arms wide, and the volley turned against Girahim. He raised his sword to block, but the ice bombarded his sword arm instead. As the frigid blast slammed against his sword arm, a fiery pain surged through him, knocking Girahim to his knees. There he knelt, panting hard. He struggled to raise his sword, but his arm felt on fire, heavy as iron, and would barely budge. A flash of red made Girahim glance up. Komei's eyes opened slowly. Just over Kataki's shoulder, Girahim caught Komei's gaze. Pain stretched clearly across her face, but she nodded at him before muttering a spell. Not so lordly now, are we, sword spirit? Kataki crooned. Let's finish this now. I shall slay you, even as the hordes you so graciously bestowed upon me kill your queen and heir. Just as Kataki raised her sword, Komei's spell reached her, and she dropped it with a shriek. She collapsed to her knees, shaking violently even as her skin twisted. Her hair grayed, her nose and ears grew, and her face contorted till at last it was not a strong, fair warrior that lay at Girahim's side, but an old woman, wailing and clawing at the ground. Girahim threw a wild glance at Komei, who had also taken the form of an old woman. Now is your chance, she croaked. We will not regain strength for some time. Do it now! Save her! Girahim crawled toward the wailing Kataki. All he need do was delve inside her mind, call his armies off. An intense pain ripped through his skull, as though someone drove a sword straight through. The pain echoed through every inch of him. His master was calling. No, pulling for him. Girahim felt the weight on his chest, as if someone had ripped inside him and sought to drag him by his imaginary heart toward them. Girahim resisted the call, struggling against the pain. He had to see Sakura. He had to know she lived, and if she was in danger, he must help her. His heir must live on, even where he might fail. Reaching a trembling hand toward Kataki's frail gray form, he lashed into the top of her head and plunged deep inside her mind. Sakura cradled the infant close as the horse thundered across the wide open plains of a vast field. A thick forest loomed in the distance. Girahim's, or perhaps it was now more accurate to see Kataki's, armies trailed right on her heels, swords, claws, and fangs at the ready. Some of the bokoblins shot arrows. Girahim yelled at them to stop, even as Sakura ducked down, barely missing. At last, she cleared the threshold of the forest, but suddenly the horse reared. Sakura's cloak caught on the branches, and geese soon surrounded them, flapping their fire-lit wings and setting her cloak ablaze. The horse reared again, but she clung tightly to his neck, pressing her thighs against his flank. She wrestled with the cloak till she had thrown it aside. She whispered comforting words to the horse, but just as they started forward again, something long and sharp pierced her side, making her cry out and clutch at her side in pain. More moblins poured into the woods. One of them drew his horse close and raised the blade. Girahim shouted a spell to throw the moblin's blade aside. No! Kataki screeched, blocking him out. Girahim pushed harder, but the weight of his master's pull forced his mind in the opposite direction, breaking his concentration. Kataki may be weak in magic and body, but her spirit held strong, as did her mind's reserve. He held Kataki fast, grappling at her mind to follow Sakura again. Kataki fought him with every breath, but at last he delved back in. Sakura was on the move again, but blood heavily stained her clothes and the horse's coat, gushing from fresh wounds. The horse flew through the forest, but it seemed the dark armies no longer pursued. She glanced back to see that the trees had come to life and knit their branches tightly together, not permitting the enemies to enter. Sakura's horse took her to a clearing with a massive tree, a solemn face etched upon its surface. As the horse stopped Sakura before the tree, its face pulled into a frown. Sakura fell from the beast. She still cradled the babe close to her heart, but blood poured from her side. The sun glistened on the blood like rubies, contrasting with the shadows masking her face. With a cry of pain, Sakura pushed herself up with one arm till she sat before the great tree, head humbly bowed. She held their son in her other arm and said, "Great tree spirit, I have heard of your great powers of protection. Please, I beg you to grant safety to my son and I, or if you will not take me, poor and spoiled maiden that I am, then at least take my son. I see you have other children here." "Those children are my own," the tree thundered. "I gave birth to them. I created them, breathed life into them. This child is demon-born, even as you have allowed yourself to be cursed in giving yourself to a demon. However, I sense also a great destiny in this child. A true and unbreakable spirit resides within him. He may yet overcome what he is born from, and become a great warrior. A hero. He may even be the hero who will lay this war crafted by your lover, this war between realms, to rest. I will keep your son and raise him as one of my children of the forest. However, I am afraid there is nothing my magic can do for you. I cannot aid anyone tainted by a demon's spell." "Thank you, great tree spirit," Sakura whispered. She gasped sharply, and then fell back onto her side. The babe cried again. She held him in her arms, gazed into his blue eyes, and sang. Her voice trembled, but her melody was as pure as if one of the golden goddesses herself had filled her heart and lips. The sun dipped below the mountains surrounding the forest, veiling the maiden and her son in shadow. Her song faded, and the light of life fled her eyes, leaving a loud emptiness in its wake. That emptiness was the last Girahim saw of her before the vision snapped, and so did he. Epilogue. Girahim stood in the endlessly stretching quiet of the dark realm. He scoffed at serene emptiness, what some might call peace. To him, it was death. It was mad torture. It was his prison. He had been created to do, to explore, to conquer. No opportunity for victory dwelt here. His master, Demise, the Demon King, stood mere feet from him. The flames waving from his head in long red gold tendrils provided the only light, giving him the appearance of a mighty lion with a mane formed of fire. As he drew his sword, it glinted in the firelight with the same cool malice pulsing through and emanating from the Demon King's entire body. Fresh rage sparked in Demise's narrow gaze. He raised his sword ever so slightly, yet with clear purpose. Girahim flinched. The Demon King watched him. Girahim, Demise said at last, my sword spirit, chosen by the gods to serve me faithfully in all things. And yet you have proven once more to be a childish, disappointing aid, intent only on seeking your own glory. Ever have I applauded your fierce determination, but now, as before, you have failed me. It was your own thirst for triumph that proves my demise now as then. So the cycle repeats itself. You are too beautiful. You are too passionate. You are too extravagant. What sort of servant have the gods cursed me with? Even the chosen hero servant was more useful. The flames surrounding the Demon King flared high. The fire gleaming inside his gaze reflected the hatred burning steadily in his heart. He stood perfectly still, unblinking, unmoving, watching. Girahim knew his master spoke truth and let his silence speak his shameless agreement. He had cared too much for himself, had reached too high, as always. Such was not a sword spirit's purpose. Perhaps you can explain, Demise continued, one last time why you failed me so miserably. The girl was handed to you. The boy was clearly no threat. Yet you let her beguile you. You focused on your dreams of what you could become, instead of seeking to raise up your master who would have you awarded with 100 such women. And even then, you fought not as a demon, but as a child. The plan should have been seamless for one of your power. Of what power do you speak, master? Girahim said, a bite in his voice as his anger began to creep up slowly, overshadowing his fear. I'm a mere servant, a weapon, to be wielded in your hands. The Demon King clenched his sword even tighter. His knuckles turned a ghostly white. Muscles pulsed visibly inside his thick arms. Do not blame your master for your failures. Do not blame the great king whose existence is your existence. You have no more chances or excuses, Girahim. The girl was handed to you, and the boy. You had no right to let either of them go. That was not your master's will. But it was mine. I was not created to kill needlessly, not even in your service. How could I have known the boy would pose such a threat? How could I know my single mercy? You were not created to show mercy, the Demon King thundered. You were not created to follow the devices of your own will. That boy was the one who would stand in my way. It is your single mercy that would have turned all of my efforts to ash. You had him in your grasp, and you let him go. Before he even knew what a threat he was, you could have destroyed him. Instead, as before, you showed weakness unbefitting the sword spirit of a Demon King. But the girl, Girahim persisted, she was no more a natural creature than either of us. The power of the goddess certainly rested within her. There was truly an unnatural force within her. She bewitched me in a way I thought not possible. A snarl ripped from the Demon King's throat. An unnatural force, he seethed, his blazing eyes devoid now of the small shred of patience he had reserved for his servant a moment ago. Of course she was helped by an unnatural force. The spirit of the hero resided within her, and you failed in doing the one thing you were meant to stop her from passing that on. You could have broken the line. I could now be king for all eternity instead of yet being prisoned in this pit of tainted light and fire and emptiness. My lord, Girahim pleaded, though all his hope had vanished. He understood he had failed. He understood he had failed irrevocably this time. He understood everything too well. There is still the other child. Did you not say he would prove a worthy vessel? It is not the way I would have things done. I would not have chosen to lower myself, to empty my spirit into some weak mortal vessel of flesh and bone, save that you leave me no choice. The goddess once did the same. It seemed to work out well enough for her. Demise stared, seemingly caught off guard at Girahim's boldness. Girahim stared back. He knew now that he taunted his master, but it was of no consequence. The pure malice in the Demon King's eyes assured Girahim that he could no longer hope to save himself. If these were his last moments to be free, to be himself, he may as well let his thoughts roll off his tongue for once. Useless, pathetic servant, Demise hissed. The gods made a mistake in fashioning you. You've been given everything you could desire. You've been lavished with every extravagance, treated like the lord you so fancy yourself. You've been spoiled like a suckling child, but no more. You remain my only connection to the outside world. But that means I must teach you. You must know pain. You must know suffering. You must know torment and longing and failure. Perhaps then you will take your purpose seriously. Perhaps then you will show gratitude to the one to whom you owe your existence. Girahim knew what his master intended. The truth hit him like a wave, and for the first time, Girahim, Lord of Demons, wanted to weep, if only to bewail the imminent fall of his beauty, grace, and utter brilliance. The Dark Realm had never given birth to another like him, nor would it. He wanted to weep, if only to bewail the sorry fate of the world being stripped of such a beautiful creature as himself. But tears would not come to him. He was not made to weep. He knew that, before the end, he would go mad, that his brilliant mind would shatter under the torment dragging him in so many opposite directions. He didn't want to go mad. He wanted to die before that happened. But he could not die. He was not born to die. He was created to prevail for one purpose and one alone. He was made to serve one master. It was hard to tell whether he hated his master or hated himself, whether he hated or loved anything at all, or whether he was even capable of love. The only thing he knew for certain was a burning hunger, a torturous need, a never-sleeping, compelling drive. Once his master did what he prepared to do, Girahim would never be satiated, could never rest, never so much as glimpse the meaning of free, until that hideous irony came to pass, until the Demon King had been freed once more and set up his reign for all eternity. Demise swung the blade and pierced it straight through Girahim. Girahim felt the essence of his spirit shattering. He roared as pain ripped through him. The pieces of his spirit were scattered above, and his conscience began to fade. Before the pain destroyed all his senses and thoughts, a single truth flitted through Girahim, the one saving grace that might pull him through insanity and torture and pain to the other side, at least somewhat intact. His son was safe. Somewhere, in a forest where children never died, the boy that Demise so adamantly despised was protected by a great tree spirit. That spirit had seen a great destiny in his son, and Girahim knew what that destiny was, even as he knew what power had lain inside Sakura. Girahim's son would rise as the next hero, and when Demise finally took the throne, Girahim would be free once more to witness his rise, just as he would be free to witness his fall as the son took his place in the cycle as the chosen hero, and, by the power of the gods, threw him down from his throne once again. Perhaps Girahim would never be a king. He saw that now. Demise would never permit him, nor would the gods permit their eternal sacred cycle to be broken. But how much sweeter his vengeance would be when he watched his own flesh and blood destroy the Demon King who sought now to destroy him. That was the sweetest revenge a demon could ever hope to see, and he would see it all in just a few short years, as soon as the boy, his boy, grew up and, just like his mother, wielded the unyielding and unbreakable spirit of a hero. And that is the end of Demon Queen. Yes, yes, now you may talk about all the thoughts inside your head.
All the thoughts inside my head.
Yes, all the thoughts.
Alright, you saved yourself there towards the end.
Did I really?
That ending was pretty cool.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Ooh, where do I begin?
Yeah? We can't see you very well.
Hi.
There we go. Yeah.
Where do I begin? I don't know where to begin.
I don't know. What do you want to talk about? This is the end of the book, man.
I know, it's very sad. Overall, I really, really liked it.
Yeah?
It's a great, great story.
Okay.
Surprisingly, so I had my trepidations.
Yeah, he's not just saying that because he's my boyfriend, because he was actually worried that he was going to like hate the end of those books, so first of all. But...
just I've never once read a book where like the villain is the hero, sort of, or the main character.
Might be the wrong
Hero's not
word,
the right
but at
word.
least the main character.
The main character.
Yeah.
I thought that was going to be hard.
Yeah.
Because I don't like rooting for the villain.
Yeah.
And I never rooted for him.
And that's fair. I think that's fair.
But I found it enjoyable to see
Mm-hmm.
his downfall. or that's what I was rooting for.
Yeah, okay, that's fair. That's fair. And I think that different people have different responses to this book. Some people actually might be rooting for Girahim.
Yeah, I can see that.
And others probably won't be, but they would be along for the ride and see how it all plays out. So. Yeah.
So what I take issue with.
Yeah.
Is him fathering my boy Link.
I know. He had this theory like a few chapters ago, and he's been mad about it ever since. So. Yeah.
That's not right.
But I like how in here it says like, well, maybe he'll rise above what he is, though.
That's where I said that.
I think that's a good message. Is that you're not necessarily what you're born into. Unless you're a demon, that might be different. But
But I mean, the implication is also that Link, half brother, is Ganon.
True. Ooh, isn't that fascinating? That could be a whole other fanfic where like they find out that they're related, and then you have like some Prince of Egypt nonsense going on. You know what I mean? So.
No.
It's interesting because then you have to think how in Ocarina of Time, if this was a true story, obviously it's not canon, but like it's my fan fiction. But if it was true about how when you're fighting Ganon, you are fighting Girahim because he's the sword again. And that at least, even though that's probably very painful for Girahim to go through, he does get to actually see his son defeat Ganon. Depending on which timeline we're in. Because there's a timeline where actually Ganon defeats Link, because that's where all the timelines split off from. Did you notice that the epilogue, for the most part, was the same as the prologue?
No, because it's been so long.
Okay, well, the epilogue scene is the exact same scene as the prologue. Of course, there's more at the ending as well. But the reason that's interesting is because if you listen to the prologue, and you haven't obviously started any other part of the book yet, you really think that Demise is talking about the Zelda and Link from Skyward Sword. The wording is, you really think, oh, she was handed to you, and before the boy knew he was a threat, you could have destroyed him, whatever. But then when you get to the epilogue, and you get to that exact same scene, you're like, oh, shoot, he was talking about Sakura and Link, Ocarina Link the whole time. So I like how I set up that scene. I don't know, sometimes I like to, think that I'm a little bit clever.
Toot your own horn.
Anyway, and in that, how you start out thinking it's one thing, and then by the end of the book, you're like, oh, that's what they were talking about the whole time. So that's pretty cool. You could always go back and read that. I know it's been a while. Just kind of see like, oh yeah, it's the same scene, and I probably thought this the first time, and now I'm thinking, now I'm knowing what's actually behind it. So, yeah.
I would like to say that I called almost everything though.
He did. He really thought that Kataki and Girahim were going to give birth to Ganon, and then once they had their kid and it didn't look like Ganon, he called the whole Link thing. What else was there to call in this book?
Demon Queen.
Oh yeah, the Sakura was going to be the Demon Queen. Obviously in this version we can just kind of get that she's some kind of descendant of Link because she had the unbreakable spirit within her. That's why Girahim was just always sensing this strong spirit about her. And probably also why Tisha could stand up to him, just sensing that really strong spirit that wasn't afraid to stand up to him, didn't have that fear of him like most other people did. And but she couldn't be the hero because the hero is always Link, and so she passed that on to her son, and that's when Link was born. So, yeah.
I always thought she was also playing Girahim. I thought that was I guess maybe she actually loved Girahim.
I think that she did care about him. I think that it could be left in a kind of ambiguous type of sense, though, to where maybe she did. I think it's possible that she could. I can't say these things because if I have things inside my head, I don't want to give all things away inside my head. But I think it's a possible theory to presume that maybe she was also kind of using him for her own devices and her own purpose.
Yeah. Trying to survive, I guess.
They kind of belong to each other in a sense, in a way. So, what do you think you would have done if this had been a complete different story and Girahim and Sakura actually had taken over the world?
That would have been cool.
Yeah.
Different.
But then we wouldn't have Ocarina of Time at all. So.
Yeah, we also wouldn't have Link's father being Girahim.
Well, I don't know. Do you have anything else you want to talk about? This is your last chance, man.
No.
Okay.
I have to deal with the aftermath now.
He does. He has to emotionally come to terms with all of this. Thank you.
I'll never see Ocarina of Time the same again.
So, That's how he feels anyway after learning about Fee and her being the sword spirit of the Master Sword, which is a whole different set of emotions.
Yeah.
But yeah, well, thank you guys for watching and listening. I hope that you enjoyed this Legend of Zelda fan fiction.
I enjoyed it.
With it being a fan fiction, I will say, like, some of the editing was off, and it's not as good as some of my more officially published books, which is to be expensive. It's not expensive, it's free, which is to be expected. Yeah, so if you are wanting a copy of this book, again, it's available for free download. I'll leave those links one more time down in the description. If you're looking to buy any of my original books, which are, actually more professionally edited and whatnot,
good.
Yeah, so far.
No.
You have a couple yet to read. You can find those on Amazon and Barnes & Noble and other websites. This was a big journey.
Mm-hmm.
We probably aren't going to read through another whole book anytime soon because I have some other things going on right now. I just received edits for the third book in my Galeon Quartet series. The book is 500 pages long, so you can imagine that the edits are pretty extensive. So we won't be doing any videos right now that are too... we'll still be releasing videos. We'll at least be doing the book hauls, introducing you guys to some new books that you might want to read for sure. But we won't be doing a ton, at least until those edits are passed, because I'm also manning my other channel, Elvish Reactions, which you guys should totally check out if you like reactions for like movies and shows, especially things of a fantastic nature. Right now, Avatar is the big thing that I'm doing, Avatar The Last Airbender. But yeah, I don't know. Yeah, just subscribe, like, check out the other channel, buy a book if you really like to read. And on that note, happy watching, happy listening, and we'll see you in our next video. Bye.
Bye.